Good afternoon. Oh, goodness, my undergraduates are peppier at 9 o'clock in the morning at Notre Dame. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Viva Bartkus. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. I have 3 objectives. Number 1, I'm going to give you the facts on the ground as I see them in the human domain. And from those, I'm going to draw out 2 big implications for USASOC soldiers. Whether you agree with me or not agree with me matters not. However, if after this little time we spend together, you ask questions just a little bit differently than you do right now, I shall consider it a success. So, you all don't need a lecture from me. I'm going to start with a story instead. So let me take you back to 2009. I'm in Lebanon with a humanitarian organization, and this is one of those times that the Israeli Air Force has bombed it back to the Stone Age. There's a tremendous amount of rubble. I'm walking through the rubble, and I'm talking to Lebanese families who have suffered through this conflict. I hear stories of all the things that they were missing at that time. Medical care, shelter, food, water. For me personally, the stories that I remember the most are the ones of the missing children. Lebanese men are very proud fathers and husbands. Not being able to look after their families during this time is a very difficult thing for them. And who helps them through this time of conflict? Who helps them? Well, I meet who helps them. It's Khalil. Now, let me describe Khalil. Khalil is jovial, like most Lebanese. He's maybe 45, but he's pretty weathered, so I can't really tell. He knows everyone in this part of Beirut. And he's been helping, whether it be with medical care or shelter or others. Now, I come back to Lebanon a couple of years later. Lebanese are very industrious. They've rebuilt this part of Beirut already. And who's still there? Khalil is still there. He goes to weddings, he goes to funerals, he helps get jobs for the young people in this part of Beirut. Who is Khalil? Well, I find out later that Khalil is actually the area Hezbollah commander. Now let me tell you, Khalil is your competition in the human domain. Think about your best soldiers. Are they on track to have the kind of relationships in communities that Khalil has? Because let me tell you, if not, we are already losing in the human domain. And it's time for USASOC to have a very serious conversation around what it's going to take to really compete for influence effectively in the human domain. So how do we start that conversation? Well, we start that conversation the way Viva starts all conversations, with data. I love data. So I'm going to give you guys the best economic data and research thus far. So, point number 1. If you take a look at the poorest billion people on the planet, 70% of them live in conflict. And the other 30% are like Burundi, who have the spillovers of conflict. So disease, pressure on the land, refugees. So what has been the world's response? Well, I will show you. This is net development assistance to the poorest billion. The way you read this chart is you have all that gray piece underneath. That is the cumulative spend of the World Bank, the IMF, and all the development agencies, right? The Brits, the Aussies, the Norwegians, USAID. Believe it or not, That is $1 trillion. What have we gotten for that $1 trillion? Let me show you. The black is the economic growth of the United States. The red is the economic growth of the poorest billion. So the return on that development aid, in effect, has been nada. Now, math speaks to me. I love numbers. The way I explain this to my students at Notre Dame is, think about it this way. The grandchildren that were born in 2010 now, in those societies of the poorest billion that suffer conflict, are fundamentally worse off than their grandparents were in the 1960s. Can you imagine that in the United States? Can you imagine you being worse off than your grandparents, or your children being worse off than you are? That is the situation on the ground. Now, you can say, Viva, we're soldiers here. Why is this economics lecture really important to us? Here's the reason why. Here's what the best economic research shows. You decrease GDP by half, you double the chance of war. You decrease economic growth just by 1%, and you increase the chance of war by 1%. Now, once again, numbers speak to me. Here's how I translate this for my students. Decrease the economic wealth of a society by half, that is poverty. Decrease economic growth, that is hopelessness. The combination of poverty and hopelessness breeds the conditions for conflict. Now, what has been the world's response to this? With the world's response to this, whether you look at the Millennium Goals of the United Nations, or you look at USAID programs, or the Grameen Foundation, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, very much focused on women. Women's education, women's health, children's education, children's health. Hey, I'm all for empowering women. Go team, absolutely. But here's my response to this. My response to this is enough with the women. I've come back from Afghanistan, Southern Sudan, Congo, Gaza, Lebanon, Mindanao in the Philippines. I'm telling you, I did not run into any Amazons. They are not fighting the battles here. No, the fight in the human domain will not be against professional soldiers like yourselves. It will be against young men who have no other alternatives, who do not have livelihoods, and some of which do not even have hope. No, the challenge will be, the race will be, how do you actually give young men a stake in peace? How do you enable them to live the lives that they should, to be members of communities, to be respected, to be able to marry, to have jobs, to have kids, to give them some other alternative? Having done this work now for many years, I will tell you this. Never underestimate the human dignity of a good day's work. Never underestimate the human dignity of a good day's work. So, what are the implications from this? Here are the implications for this. Implication number one. USASOC soldiers, the SOF community, are absolutely going into the conflict prevention business. Now, you can get to that point of view one of two ways. I have gotten to a real understanding of conflict prevention through my own path, which has absolutely witnessed the suffering that conflict causes. So for me, I will always remember my first genocide. and really staring at man's inhumanity to man. For me, this was in Srebrenica, in Bosnia. But you don't have to be Catholic. You don't have to be a person of faith. You don't have to think about this from a perspective of the human suffering that conflict causes to get to conflict prevention. Nope. Of course, had to go find my Sun Tzu from my library. You can absolutely get to conflict prevention in exactly the same way. The supreme art of war is the defeat of the enemy without ever fighting. Now, the question becomes how to do this. And my observation over the last year of spending time with you all is that I'm not sure you have the words yet, that you have the thinking yet, that you understand exactly what the mission should be, or even how you keep track as to whether or not you're successful. You have yet to develop the language around conflict prevention. But you already have a manual. Indeed, Field Manual 3-07, 200 pages. Took me 2 days to make it through with Google Translator because the Army loves its acronyms. I don't disagree what's written in here. I think it's actually very well written and very well thought out. Some of the pieces here, how to think about the illicit economy, how to bring private capital to invest, how to think about taking down barriers for private sector, how to think about employment. Absolutely. But let's think about this for a moment. I have a PhD in economics and international relations. I spent 10 years working in industry on the equivalent of Wall Street. I have spent the last 7 years of my life rebuilding war-torn societies by harnessing the power of business and economics. I'm telling you, I don't even know how to do this. And you guys are going to send out a captain with a manual? Really? See, I don't think it's about a manual, fundamentally. I think it's about creativity and flexibility and adaptability. That's what I think it's really about. So I'm going to read to you from this book called The Generals. So this is about the Great War, World War I. Usually everyone gets it wrong at the beginning of a new war. In 1914, every army of all the belligerent powers shared a common doctrine of the dominance of the offensive and the inevitability of rapid and decisive campaigns. The point is not to be right at the outset, an almost impossible task, but to be able to change as the war unfolds. In these circumstances, when everyone starts wrong, the advantage goes to the side which can most quickly adjust itself to the new and unfamiliar environment and learn from its mistakes. The advantage goes to the side which can most quickly adjust itself to the new and unfamiliar environments and learn from its mistakes. I think this is far closer to what competing effectively in the human domain is going to be all about. And we are betting on you. The University of Notre Dame is not spending time at USAID. We're spending time with USASOC. Why? Because we're betting that the soldiers of USASOC will figure this out faster in the nastiest places in the world in order to compete effectively in the human domain than anyone else. Okay, so that's implication number one. You guys are heading into the conflict prevention business. Implication number two is The only way you're going to do that effectively is through partnerships. Remember, Khalil is your competition, right? How do you actually start thinking about the partners you're going to need? Once again, I'm not sure you have the language for it yet, or the mindset. And it's going to be very difficult, because you have come out of the most powerful, coercive organization on the planet, the US Army. And let me tell you, there's two ways to influence people: coercion and empathy. And building a set of partnerships will require empathy. And it will require seeing things that might be possible, seeing the common ground, and then taking the first steps towards it. So let me tell you a story about where I think you guys will be heading in the future. A story about partnership. This is the 1957 Civil Rights Commission. You see President Eisenhower there in the middle. What everyone else in the world saw was 3 Southerners and 3 Northerners. The person second from the left is Father Ted Hesburgh, the president of the University of Notre Dame. No one gave this commission any chance of actually getting anything done. But you know what? Father Ted did not see 3 Northerners and 3 Southerners. Father Ted saw 6 fishermen. And he took this commission, after some very difficult times and testimonies in the South, up to the peace and tranquility of Wisconsin, where Notre Dame has a retreat. And these 6 men fished and deliberated and talked. And where they finally got to was the report that was the underpinning for the 1964 Omnibus Civil Rights Act. Desegregation of education, desegregation of housing, desegregation of labor. What am I saying here? You're going to have to see the world for its possibilities. Did you guys know about Father Ted's contribution here? I didn't. Did you know about Notre Dame's contribution here? I didn't. Why? Because it wasn't about Father Ted. And it wasn't about Notre Dame. It was about the work and the impact and seeing what might be possible. Now, you're going to have internal partners and external partners. I'm going to start with the external partners because it might be a little easier. The external partners will be non-traditional. We talk about whole of government approach. I'm telling you, that's not going to be sufficient. But it will be very different than what you're used to. And here's the reason why. On the left-hand side is the operating budget. On the right-hand side is the countries where everyone works. So there you are, USASOC. You're in the bottom left. You're the dark blue. What this shows you is here's the operating budget of General Electric, United Technologies, Exxon, and the Gates Foundation. That means Bill Gates, in half of his lifetime, has created more economic wealth that he gives away every year than your annual budget. You will have new and different and untraditional partners who also have a stake in long-term stability. You will have common ground with large corporations, with the GEs of the world. Why? Why do they call it the peace dividend? Because you make more money in peace. GE has a stake in that. Exxon has a stake in that. And you know what? Humanitarian organizations like the Gates Foundation or others, UNICEF, Mercy Corps, Catholic Relief Services, World Vision, all have a common stake. And so these will be some of the ones that you will be partnering with as you're working out of embassies in different parts of the world. Right? It's going to be vastly different. The second piece of my message, though, is that partnership starts at home. Outside of your own team, company, battalion, tribe. Who have you partnered with? Who have you helped? Who's helped you? Think about that for a moment. I'm telling you, I have sat in meetings at Fort Bragg, literally, where I'm thinking, are you guys all on the same team? Really? Well, let me tell you, this is not Animal Farm, right? All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. All tribes are equal, but some are more equal than others. No, 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 no. There's going to have to be a very deep respect for the capabilities and contributions that each tribe, each organization contributes in order to begin to wrestle down some of the challenges in the human domain. Now, how to start down this path? It's a difficult path. Well, I'd like to give you one of my favorite quotes from St. Augustine on partnership. Let us on both sides lay aside all arrogance. Let us not on either side claim that we have already discovered the truth. Let us seek it together as something which is known to neither of us. For only then may we seek the truth lovingly and tranquilly, if there be no bold presumption that it is already discovered or possessed. Now, if a quote from a saint doesn't work for you, I'm going to give you a quote from the dead. Jerry Garcia, you can waste your entire life being the best of the best, or you can just go do something no one else can do. So, what is it in summary? Number one, Khalil is your competition in the human domain, and he is racing ahead. Number two, you're going to have to figure out the whole conflict prevention business and how to partner towards those goals. And the only thing that matters is how the soldiers in this room actually address these challenges. Thank you very much.